Hey, Bobby here with Coder Foundry. And today I want to talk to you something that's near and dear to Coder Foundry's heart. As you know, we are a coding bootcamp and we teach people to code. But more than that, our main job is to get our students software development roles. And that impacts us in several ways. Over the last 10 years, we've been debriefing students from their interviews, collecting information about what do companies ask and what do they ask them to do, otherwise known as coding challenges. And we take this feedback and we work it into our curriculum. So our curriculum represents what a student may be asked on the interview. And also we've built a lot of resources that allow students to practice these kind of coding challenges they get so that they're more familiar and they'll do better during the interview process. And we've boiled this down into 5 common coding challenge types, and we've built resources around all of those. But today, I want to share with you a brand new resource that we've built, and we're going to crack open the code and help you solve it together. So in case you've seen this coding challenge, you'll be better prepared after watching this video. But first, let's talk about the 5 coding challenges you may face and the resources Coder Foundry has to help you solve them. The first one that you'll see that we've seen a lot is called the landing page. Now, the landing page is basically they give you a wireframe or an image and they said, create this web page using CSS and the CSS framework of your choice. Typically, we see this built with Bootstrap, but it could be Tailwind. And a lot of times they want it in 2 flavors. They want it with the framework and without. So you do need to know like native Flexbox or something like that to be able to do this accurately. Now, the next one we see is the algorithm. And when you think of coding challenges, this is probably what you're thinking about. And this is your LeetCode code style programming challenges. But I want you to think about what types of those challenges should you be doing. And so inside of LeetCode, there's a lot of these different kind of algorithms, pathfinding, there's binary tree, but I want you to think less binary tree and more array and maybe dictionary. And if you can answer array-based challenges, can you sort an array? Can you filter array? Can you split an array? Can you join 2 arrays together? If you can do those types of challenges, you're going to be okay with the algorithm challenge because that's predominantly what we're seeing in the marketplace of the types of questions people are being asked. Now, it just so happens here at Coder Foundry, we've created a resource called the JavaScript Coding Challenges that gives us 13 unique ones that we've seen over the years that you can go try and see if you're ready to interview. Now, the third one we're seeing a lot of is called the API. And the API is the interviewer will give you an API URL, and you're expected to take that URL and turn that into a working web page. So you got to know if you're using JavaScript, how to use the Fetch API, or if you're using something like C# with Blazor or MVC, you got to know HTTP client. Or if you're using another type of stack, you got to know how to consume an API, a REST API, and then turn that JSON data you get as a result set into an active web page. Now here we've created something called Galactic Relics, and I've got a link below that an API that we stood up has a challenge on it, and you can go try it out to see, hey, am I ready? Can I do an API challenge, or what do they look like? This will help you solve those as well. The fourth one is the SQL, and this is the one that confuses a lot of students because in general, they've learned how to build some kind of stuff in websites, but many programs don't talk about SQL or how to interact with the database. And so what they do is they give students or a candidate a connection string, and they say, hey, write these 4 SQL statements. And your job is to use something like SQL Management Studio or PG Admin or some other type of tool to execute SQL against this connection string. So you need to know how to connect to a database and then write SQL that returns the correct results based on the challenge you're given. We also have a course here that goes through the SQL Essential course on Learn.Coder that talks all about using SQL inside of SS Management Studio that helps you solve challenges like this. Now, the 5th one is the one we're going to talk about today, and we call this the full stack. And the full stack is something that people are asking now is they'll give you a connection string and say, this is our database. I want you to create a web page that pulls back maybe a list. And so this could be a list of customers or a list of orders or a list of transactions. And so you need to do a couple of things. First, you need to get the connection string and you need to connect to it. Second, you probably need to stand up a REST API that is the layer between the database and your web page. And you create an API layer. And then that API layer can talk to your web page, and then you can get some results. So it's going to look like this. You got a web app that you've built, and then you're going to stand up an API, and then that API is going to communicate to the database. Now, if you don't know what an API is, you probably need to do more study. Today, this is what we're going to build. We're going to show you how to build one of these inside of with C# and Blazor. But these types of apps can be built with any stack. So if you're saying, hey, I'm a React Node guy, you can definitely use Node to stand up a server endpoint. You can use Ruby, you can use MVC, you can use Java Spring. We're going to use C# Web API and Blazor as our client side. So a REST endpoint is just an interface that the application can talk to, and it typically gets JSON back from that API. And so we're going to show you how to do this today, and then give you 3 additional challenges that you can test yourself with to see if you're ready for interviewing. Okay, so let's break open the code and let me show you what we're going to build. Okay, before we get started coding here, let's look at the challenge site that we've created. This is chinook.coderfoundry.com, and there's a lot of information in here to help you get started. First and foremost is the setup guide, and I'm going to use parts of this, but we're going to start from a different spot. But if you're doing this from a blank Visual Studio template, this will show you how to do it. The first thing that you need to do, step 1, is do this. We're not going to do this in this video, but you need to go and install Postgres, pgadmin, and then create the database using pgadmin and use this SQL file right here. After you've got that, you can follow the rest of the video here because we're going to be using this database. This SQL file has all of the information to create the database plus the data in it and help you get started real quick. All right, the next thing you need to do is go to this challenge repo, and this is on YouTube or on GitHub, and you can go and grab this and create a new repo from our new repository from this template. You can also clone it if you're used to doing it that way, or download the zip. All right, but this is where we're going to start from, okay? And that's what we're going to do right now. Okay, so get the database installed, and I'll see you in the code. So once you have the code running or downloaded, it's going to look like this. You've got a Chinook solution, and you've got 2 projects here. One is the server-side project. This is where we're going to build all of our APIs. And this is the client-side project, and this is where we're going to build our user interface for each challenge. All right. Now I've got examples. You can go to chinook.coderfoundry.com, and you can look at the example pages. They're all complete, and you can look at the UI that we're generating for each one of the pages. And that's to give you an example of how it works, but none of the code is visible. So you have to write the code your own, but at least you can see how it looks. All right. So I've got this running here and just show you kind of what you get out of the box with our sample page. It's pretty good. And so we have a landing page here on the home page, and notice right away what we're talking about when we talk about templates here at Coder Foundry is that these templates are branded by our students. So if you're coming through the self-paced course, you already have, you may not have this, but if you're coming in the full-time cohort, you already have this. And so like we're building these templates out, that's what we do. And we brand all the interview challenges that we send in to companies, all right? Or at least that's the suggestion. All right, if you're coming here from YouTube, you get this entire thing here, and what you need to do is modify this to be about you and not about Coder Foundry if you're using this to send it in to customers. If you're just here to learn, you don't have to modify this. But I'm going to show you how to quickly modify this real quick. So over here in our project here, I'm going to go to the server-side project, and I'm going to go to components, and you can see the footer right here in layout. The footer has all of these links in the bottom, and you need to change all of these to represent you, okay? And take all the references to Coder Foundry out of it so that when you submit this in, it can be about you, all right? Now, the next thing I want to do is come over to this nav menu here, and I'm going to change it from app name, and we're just going to brand this. So we're going to say Chinook Interview Challenge. Now, what this would be, and if you're doing this for real for a company, is the company name interview challenge maybe, or you know, something like that. Identify the company and the type and the name of the challenge that you're given. And then come back here and go to the home page, and this is in the client-side project homepage. And in here, you change the landing page here. I'm going to say Chinook interview challenge, and then put your name in here, presented by Bobby Davis or whatever. Okay, so now you have a branded app. And you can see it's changed now, and so now we've got our presented by Bobby Davis, and we got our home, and then we are branded up here. This looks like in full screen. Okay. Now again, you'll have to come down here and change the footer to represent you. Maybe change this icon to your personal logo. If you don't have one, go get one. And then the other thing that's in this is built-in Swagger support. So if I click on this, when we write endpoints, they're going to automatically show up here. So not only will you give them a UI to show you how you solve the challenge, but also you're going to give them a test harness to test all of your endpoints. That's a pretty powerful combination. We're building challenges like this, and it'll show up here automatically. So there's nothing that we really need to do. Okay, kind of cool. The only thing we can do is configure this page as well. I'll show you where that is so that we can go ahead and brand this by the challenge. And so I'm going to come over here, and that is in our program CS in the server-side project. And it's pretty easy to find. You can see it right here where it's saying Swagger Doc. And let's just change this to Chinook Interview Challenge. BI. And then just say Chinook Interview Challenge API spec. And then put your name in here. You can put Bobby Davis or whatever your name is, and then your email address right there. All right, so once that's done, just save that. And now we've changed everything. Okay. So now we can look at what's going on here. Probably refresh it, probably. We may have to restart the app. This runs at startup. So if we restart the app, we'll get the changes. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do, we've set this up. The first thing you're going to do is you've customized the app, and now we need to get in a connection to our database. And so they're usually in the interview challenge, they're going to provide this for you. We're going to set this up here in app settings. And you can see here, we've already created a connection string here. Now, the one thing that of note here is that in general, this is a bad practice. Because when you post this to GitHub or commit it, your connection string would be in your source code. And you normally would do this in manage user secrets and put your connection string in here, and then that would be stored on the local machine that you're developing on. However, in the case of I'm trying to submit code to someone that they can evaluate me as a candidate, if we submit the connection string in the code and they kind of download it, it'll just execute and run, and they don't have to modify the project to get it to work. And I think that's the case that we want to accomplish here. We want them to run it really quickly. All right, so we're going to just modify it right here. If you're putting that app strings in the app settings and you're worried about that, when you send an email to them, just tell them why you did it and how user secrets work. That's another thing that you could show your knowledge about, but we're going to put it right here to make it easy. So I'm assuming you've made a database. I called mine Chinook, and whatever you called yours, I'm sure that's what it's called. And then you need a password that you've set up in Postgres. And don't get excited. This is the password just to a local version of Postgres on my machine. And so this is a connection string that we've established here. Now notice the word connection strings. This is important. EF framework does look for this name here. And then we're going to give this a name, our custom name here. So I'm going to say Chinook DB. And this is the name of our connection string, and the name of the connection strings right here is something that we need to follow. Okay. So now that we've done that, the other thing that we need to do is make sure that the database we're using has a package installed. and we don't have any packages installed here. Now, the reason we didn't do it out of the box is you may be using SQL, you may be using Oracle. And here we're using Postgres and we're using Entity Framework, but they may be using some other ORM. So let's install the database stuff that we need for an EF framework and Postgres. So I'm going to go to Manage NuGet Packages here, and I'm going to install a couple of packages that we can use to make sure that this works. All right. So first thing is PG MPG. MPG SQL, and we're going to pick this one. Okay, this is Entity Framework Postgres SQL. We'll install it, and what this will do is also install the MPG SQL driver as well. So we're going to install this. All right. Get this down here. Okay. So now we've installed that. The next thing I need to do is install Entity Framework. So I'm going to say Microsoft Entity Framework. And I'm going to get the tools here, right here. And install that. And I'm going to get design. I'm going to install that. And that's the two packages I need. Okay. All right. So you should come up here and see Swashbuckler. That's our Swagger support, MP SQL, and Entity Framework. And we should be, that's all we need. So we can get rid of this, save our connection string, and now we can reverse engineer our database. All right, so that's the two things we need to do. And I'm going to come over here to Package Manager Console. And I'm going to run a command here that allows me to do this. And you can see in our setup guide here, we've got the command for you. I'm going to pull it out of here just so you know where to find it. We've set up our connection string and we've installed our packages. And now we're going to reverse engineer the database right here. So this line of code, we're going to copy this line of code here. And this is coming right out of the setup guide. And I'm going to push this right into my Package Manager Console. And right here, I want you to notice here, I've got the connection string established here. And notice how it's spelled, that I'm using this property here, connection strings. And then I've named my connection string Chinook DB, and you notice the casing there, okay? And so this will look this up here and find it. And then it says what driver I'm going to use. We've installed the driver here. Should be installed, and then it's going to create an output directly and put this in a directory called models. All right. So if we run this, boom. Okay. So now we've got this models directory here, and this is the entities inside the database. It's pulled them back. If you don't have a database and you don't have a connection string, this won't work. This assumes you have the database and the connection string is properly configured. And it pulled back and created these models here. And these DB sets are all of the things that we can access for this. All right, so we're going to do some housekeeping here and change this up a little bit. In here, I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call this data. And I'm going to move this context to this folder data. And it's going to say, hey, do you want to do this? And I'm like, yes. Do you want to change the namespaces? It'll ask me that. I'm going to say yes. Okay. All right. So let's close all of this stuff down here. We don't need this anymore. Now, the next thing I want to do is in my client project, I want to be able to access these models in my client project. So they need to exist down here. We can configure the server-side project to see folders in here, but the client project cannot see the models in the client in the server side project. So we have to move this. So I'm going to cut this and I'm going to move it down here to the client project. And then over here, inside of my components here, I'm going to make sure that it can see it here. So I'm going to make sure it's included here. But first, one of the problems we're going to have is we need to make sure that this namespace is correct. And so I'm going to say .client .models. All right. And so this is our new namespace for each one of these. Just copy this, and we need to change this for each of these files here. So the namespace is where it's located, and we need to change that for each one of these. So that both apps can see these files here. Okay, so we should have them all changed now. We shouldn't, let's see, okay. And then over here, let's make sure we got them all changed here. I missed one. Okay, make sure they're all changed. You should see these go away after it saves them. Now, the other thing that we need to do is come over here to our imports, and let's just make sure that not only can it see the client, but it can actually see the models as well. So you need to change your imports here on the server side so that they're included. So this, anytime we write server side code, we'll be able to see these models. All right. Same thing here. We're going to do this in the client side as well. And that's our setup. All right, so we've successfully reverse engineered the database. All right, one final thing that we need to do here is in our Chinook database connection context here, we need to be able to move this around. All right, so it's saying it can't find them. Let's make sure that changes. Take this out. It should find it. Make sure our models are included. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is move this connection string. While it does work here, we like this in Program CS, and so we're going to delete that line of code here, and then we're going to come to Program CS, and we're going to uncomment where we set this up for you. And it's called Chinook context is what we named our class. And if it's not finding it, it's Chinook interview data. And then right here it's going to ask for entity framework. So let's add that in. Okay, so now that we've got this, it'll find it. We do need to make sure that this is spelled correctly here. So we call ours Chinook DB. And that is the connection string here in your app settings here. Just make sure that this is spelled right. Okay, So now we have our connection string set up in here, looking at the right context, and then looking in the right place for the connection string, and this will inject that into our database. All right, so the next thing we need to do now is write an endpoint for this. So step 2 is to write an endpoint. So we've set up our database, we got a connection, and so let's write an endpoint. So I'm going to come over here and right click, and I'm going to say add new folder, and I'm going to call this controllers. And then in here, I'm going to write a new controller. And we're going to pick API, empty. And the first challenge one is to list the customers. Okay, so we're going to write a customers controller. So we're going to give it a name, which is the name of the entity, plural size. So it's customers controller.cs. That's what we're going to look for. Add. And so I'm going to create a route for it. So this route is API slash, and then whatever you named it before the word controller. So it's going to say API slash customers. That's our route. Okay. And that's why we're naming it this way. So, and then in here, we're going to write our very first method, which is an HTTP GET. There's 4 verbs: a get, a put, delete, patch, but we're going to write gets for this. All right. And a get will return records here. And that's all it does. So let's write our first method signature. We're going to say public. And we're going to make ours async. And then we're going to make, because of that, it's got to be a task. And it will return an action result. And then we're going to return a type of customer. So we're going to return a list of customer. So if it's not finding them, make sure you can find the models. All right, and then we can just say get customers async. All right, so that's the base level of what's going here. And so the first thing we want to do also in here is add in our database connection. So we have to inject that into here. So we can use primary injection here. So we can just inject, we give it a type. And then we give it a name. All right, so for this, we want to just write a real quick method here. Use link. I'm not going to go over link here. I'm assuming if you're at this level, you already know what link is, or you already know how to query it. So we're going to make sure that to see what you can do. That's the purpose of this. So we're going to try and write a quick link statement here. And we'll put a try catch around it. And we'll say var customers equals await customers to sync. And so it's saying, hey, you're missing something, right? So we can add using entity framework core, make sure that's up here. And then we get this statement in here. Okay. And I'm going to return this right here. So we're going to do it like this. Okay. So this will return a OK for customers. And we can also put a catch here. So if there's some kind of problem that we don't know, we're going to return a problem. Just leave this blank. We could try to write this to the server. In the real world, you would probably have a login here, but this should work okay, depending on what server we're on. But no, this will be written to the server wherever it's executing. Okay, so that's that. Let's see. 14. Okay, there's an extra one here. All right. Okay, now the other thing in the stats there, or the definition, it said to order these by last name. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to just say .order by. And so now we can order this by last name. You can do shorthand in here, and we'll make it shorter. That's the variable passing in, and this is the property we're going to order by. So right off the bat, we've got our first endpoint written. And if everything works the way we want, this should show up on our Swagger page, and it should work. So let's try it out. Check it out. This is automatically added. We can do a get. We can try it out and execute. Look at that. We do now have our customers coming back, and you can see here it's the first one is A, so it's ordering them by last name. They're not in order by customer ID. They're ordered by last name. So that works. And so in a real way, we've accomplished the first part of this. The challenge is write a query that returns a list of customers. Just so we remember here, we can look at our challenges here from this site here. Look at the instructions. And right here, we can go to challenge 1. And it's just saying write a simple SQL, or we wrote link, and alphabetically by last name, okay? And so now we have an endpoint that does that. But down here, we can do the presentation requirements. So let's see if we can get this part done, and then I'm going to leave the pagination and search for you to figure out how to do. So let's see if we can get it. So this is kind of, I showed you this before or didn't, but like this is the challenge site. You can come here and look at it and see how it kind of works. But this doesn't give you code. This just shows you UI. All right. So let's write our quick page here and wire it all up. And so the next step we want to do is come to our client project. I'm going to add a brand new page. And I'm just going to call it challenge1.razor. And for this to be a page, it needs a page directive. And that will give it the route so it can be found. And then we're going to give it a render mode. And in our case, this is interactive WebAssembly. Okay, so let's let's wire this up here into our menu system. So come back over here to your nav component here, and this is our nav menu. And let's add an LI right after the home page here. And let's give it a link, and we'll say challenge 1. And we can just say code. I think we could just give it a 1 too, something like that. See if that works. Okay, challenge 1. We could probably name this a little better. Challenge 1, because we'll actually have 2. There we go, challenge 1, okay? All right. So we've got our page wired up. And so now all we need to do is call our endpoint. So to call our endpoint on our page, just go over here. we need to inject an HTTP client. So I'm going to say inject HTTP client. All right, and this allows us to call endpoints, and this is our code behind here. And so first and foremost, we need a private variable to hold a list of customers. So we'll call this list customer, and call it customers. And then we can just go ahead and set it up to say equal new. All right, so it's always got at least an empty list in here. All right, and then we'll check the counts in our front end to see if it works. All right. So the next thing I need to do is figure out how to call it and when to call it. And then we'll build a UI. So I'm going to create this protected override on initial async, and then I need to call through HTTP this injection here, and then I need to return a list of customers, and it's API customers. Okay, that's the name of our URL here. If you look at, go over here and look at the server side in our controller, this doesn't have a route on it, so this is the default route. So API-customers will call this method. That's how that worked. You can give these things names if you want to, but you can look that up. And so you can give this name, you know, you could call it something like get customers. And then you would come back and just call it by that route at that point. And so once we did that, you would come over here and this would be your route. Okay, something like that. So we'll try it like that. And let's see if this works. We definitely can look at this first before we write our UI to see if it actually does work. Let's do something else real quick. Let's try this first, and then there is kind of a problem doing it this way, but let's try this. So we can say try and put this in the middle. Try catch here, and then catch. And then if it's a catch, we'll just say customers equals a new list of customers. Okay, so what's going to happen is in WebAssembly, this will render this page. It's called pre-rendering on the server. And the first time it comes through, this will fail. Okay, because on initialize async, we'll do a pre-render. And then once it's in WebAssembly, it'll re-render it again and call it. There's a couple of ways that we could get around this, but this is, for now, this will work. All right, so let's set a breakpoint here, and I'll show you what happens. It could turn pre-rendering off, but we'll step over it, see if it works. And that's fine. It says invalid. It's because it's run on the server. Let's run it one more time, and it'll come back through here because now it's in WebAssembly. And let's see if it works. And we should be able to look at it. Step over. So I've added it to watch, and we can see here we have our customers in there. So it did work. Check it out. All right. So hit continue. And now we just need to display this in our UI and we're done. All right. So we'll stop here. And then we're done at that point. All right, so let's write a quick UI. And I'm going to say div. I'm going to put a container here. I like to do this in my components and make it look a little better. And we'll say class. If I could type, get your keys right. And then we'll say container, and this is Bootstrap. Okay, and then we're going to move this into there, and that'll be challenge 1. I've got some style set up here, so I can say class equals CTA title. You want to look those up, you can go over here to www and look at the CSS, and it's in this template file here. And then I can put a paragraph in here and display all the list of all the customers in the database, ordered by last name. All right, and so that's our title here. We can also put a class on this. I have a subtitle here, so I can say class equals CTA subtitle. I can make sure that's spelled right. Subtitle and title right there. And then from there, we just need to display it. Okay. And so for here, we can say, we can write an if. And one thing I like to do is do it this way. Let's do it a different way. We can check to see if it's loading. So I typically write a private boolean is loading, set this to true, and then after this happens, we can say is loading is false. Okay, something like that, right? All right. So we can say if is loading is equals true or false. Do some stuff else. Do this, and then let's extend this div here in the bottom around all of this like that. And then in here we can just put a p tag is loading. And then here we can write a table. And we'll just say, and we'll use a Bootstrap table here, and we'll say table dash striped, give it a color, and then maybe put a shadow on it. And then we'll see t-head. Say first name. Last name. And we're going to do email. And that's all we need to do. That's what the challenge wanted. Simple as that. And then here, I'll turn it dark. So I'll say table dash dark. All that's going to do is make this black with white text. And then here we can hit our T body up. And then we'll for each over our customer. And this is going to for each over our customer list, first name, last name, put it in here. Okay, and that's going to return all of our customers in here. Okay. We should be okay that this should never get through. Even in the case of pre-rendering, this will be empty. So there'll be nothing in here. So this should be okay. It'll never be null the way we're loading this. And we're also making sure that the private list is also instantiated. All right. So let's just run it, see what happens. And I think that'll do it. Challenge 1. There you go. All right, all of them coming back. Kind of cool. All right, well, that is challenge 1, the initial thing of it. I'll leave it up to you to figure out how to do searching and maybe paging. We will build a full course for this, so if you need all the answers, you can go to learn.coderfoundry.com and get a full, complete course on all of the challenges. We'll cover everything in it. But for now, this should give you enough information, the challenge site, to see kind of where your skills lie and can you could you pass one of these challenges? With enough practice, you absolutely can. They're not that difficult. It's just having a template, being prepared, and then knowing how to build a reverse engineer database, build an API, and then building a quick UI to bring it back. All right. So anyway, I hope this helps. Good luck and keep coding.